Hey, welcome back to Garbro's Field Desk. I have for you Chapter 15 of the Veil Riders, Book 4. Like, subscribe, comment down below. Let's go. Chapter 15. Busy Work. As the weeks slowly warmed into the month of Fisk, so did the two fronts of Yule's and the Free People's War. Spies that had inserted themselves around the Fey forces made note of the Veil's resolute resistance to being wrangled. It was becoming an infected thorn in the side of the Fey. The Veil scratching and clawing at the Fey's grip on it gave Yule the breathing room he desperately needed, and recruits were still streaming in from all corners of the world, some even coming by boat and landing on the shores of the Confederation. That was not to say that everyone was happy about the war, as there were actual sides being drawn up that wanted nothing to do with Yule. These factions, mostly in the Odorous range, were attempting to do things their own way, all without the help of Yule or Coco. Kings of the realms within the range already had a strained relationship with the Veil Riders, and the more pompous varieties were balking at the cost of enlisting Yule's help. This, in turn, gave power to a roving belief structure known as the Rustblood Animus, that deemed the humans dangerous and not worth trusting despite the news coming in from the Immelnora's Confederation. This animosity came to a head when a group of citizens armed with local and pilfered Fey weapons rebuked a trade caravan from the Veil Riders and returned away with violence on the mind. Yule and Coco, of course, always knew this day was coming. But as Coco was in the heart of pro-Veil Rider country, it was up to Yule to deal with this mess. Yule found himself at the meeting table one morning in mid-Fisk, staring in annoyance down at a map that Gremlin had written up. The human was nearing the final months of her pregnancy, as long as everything went according to plan. I thought Gremlin was going in for a checkup. Yule asked Chicks, the human having been arguing with the male Brim-Touch Master Sergeant Alistair Moen. Did she sneak out to get this map made? She should be on house arrest. I've personally seen the size of her ankles. Chicks looked over to Yule, finger still jabbed at the Brim-Touched.
Her men and women have been visiting her at home, and she made it up there.
It still doesn't change the fact that we have those bastards up in the mountains trying to turn people against us.
First Sergeant Erinda Caine muttered, nursing a mug of morning ale in her hands.
Where did they even get the nerve? They are actively fighting against the Orcs, who were getting supplied by the Fae, who we were trying to help out with.
It is believed that a minor noble may have turned them to their side after the death of his brother, who was serving with the Veil Rider Intelligence Corps at the time.
Master Sergeant Moen said, leaning back in his chair with a sigh.
There was already an infection of imperious, self-centered royalty in the area. I can't say I am too surprised to hear of the cities within the family mountains deciding they can do it on their own.
Erinda Caine took a sip from her mug, then set it back down on the meeting table with a dull thud.
Field General Mackey is still with us, as are the nobles within Eldehinda. They don't exactly have a choice in the matter if you ask me, being so close to the Orc invasion front. Everything north of Eldehinda, I would not place any bets on them being for us. Then of course there are the people trapped within the mountains down in Eldehinda.
The scattered holdings are firmly ours, Gruesome said, having just arrived that morning and still wearing his traveling cloak. Nosham was able to meet with me several times, and we have long-range harpies dropping supplies to him. He has already launched harassment attacks on the Alterac elves and is slowly figuring out the irregular ways to wage war. Erinda Caine nodded.
Nosham is a good man, just wishes he was not the leader of that area. With the southern elf lands having been moved directly south of Alberdan, I believe that will still be where the war will be mostly waged. Likely they will expand west into the Null Beacon, but I don't believe they will find much help, let alone in the jungle lands there.
No front stays in one place forever, Yule said, rubbing at his forehead as he shoved the map away. Wherever we expand, they'll expand to match and the war will continue there. We have already signed Queen Madmirin on contract, which means the orcs around her will likely be pursued by the Fae. Master Sergeant Moen reached into his sling bag and pulled out a leather-wrapped bundle of papers.
Speaking of Queen Madmirin, her help with the contracts has allowed us to push forward at speed with this new steam initiative. As well, it appears you and your humans pissed off the dwarves.
How do you mean? Yule asked, looking out the window as a Valley Elf private went zipping by on a broom, though she was hanging on for dear life rather than riding it. Moen laughed, opening the leather binder.
I have here letters saying that there is not 1 or 2 trunks coming our way, but an entire fleet of 50 modified T214 trucks and 20 M26 dragon wagons. They have also done this with a few dingoes and motorcycles.
A fleet? Yule cried out, more in delight than alarm. How in the fuck did they get an entire fleet ready?
The fact a handful of humans managed to make a steam-powered vehicle in only a few days appears to have set them to a challenge.
Moen said with a grin, pulling out a piece of paper and handing it to Yule.
Kerbedir had enlisted multiple villages of Oni and Brimtouch to come work within their holds. It was a rather large and bold move on their part. This allowed them to work around the clock and manufacture these vehicles at haste, not to mention some massive vehicle they called their quote-unquote Big Rover.
Yule looked down at the paper and read along, his eyebrows raising a few centimeters with every passage. Where did they even find the time for this? They'd have been working around the clock in massive shifts.
Because they were,
Moen said, pulling out a sheet of paper and handing it to Chicks as well.
They've taken an M939 cargo truck and simply scaled it up. It is a massive 5-axle truck that has a crew of 4 and can travel for days at a time as long as it's fed water. They allege it can carry massive loads of trailers that can stretch as far as 10 long.
Chicks gave a whistle, looking at the schematic in her hand.
They made a massive truck that can pull a land train. There's even a garrison trailer that holds escort troopers.
For bandits and the like,
Moen replied. They have 1 already built and are planning for 10 more. Yule said with a chuckle, then looked over to Chicks. These things can clear the road from city to city in a single go. We may have to start constructing their own road lanes as if they were actual trains. Chicks gave her own laugh, holding up the piece of paper.
They're saying the steam-powered dragon wagons will be hauling fresh war armor with them as well. If these are actually working off the steam engine designs...
They've refined them a fair bit and are larger, but yes.
Moen interjected.
Then that means we have more fuel for the tanks and aircraft. They haven't stopped making the airframes for the A-37s or rotor wings.
Chicks finished, giving the Master Sergeant an annoyed side-eye. First Sergeant Erinda Caine let out a relieved breath.
While I would usually press for maintaining a defensive line, we can't do that forever knowing what kind of weapons you humans use. The stories about the Apache helicopter were scary enough, and I would wager the Fae are putting together those massive jets you humans keep talking about.
Only means we have to work on our surface-to-air weapons, Yule said, then turned to look at the doors as Wulf and Domino walked in. Ah, you're finally here. Go ahead and have a seat. We'll fill you in.
I've got her.
Private First Class Zai called out, the tall red Oni giving a short hop into the air and snatching up both the Valley Elf and her broom mid-flight. The Oni spun around halfway with the speed of the elf, and the two tumbled to the ground in a tangle of arms and legs. The rest of the troopers laughed or snickered, many of them also holding brooms.
How are we supposed to get these things to stop?
The Valley Elf cried out, squeezing her eyes in pain as Zai helped her to her feet. Sergeant Helena, gripping her own broom, wiped a tear from her good eye, her other covered by a better patch that was no longer scratched up or dinged from combat.
You're supposed to push down with your heels and pull up on the stick. That tells it to slow down. The harder you push and pull, the harder it's going to stop.
It may become more difficult to stop when you fail to stay on, Boone murmured, which caused a few of the other humans to snort to themselves. Helena smiled at Boone. It took a lot to maintain her military bearings and not wrap her arm around him. She instead swung her leg over her broom again and gave a soft kick away from the ground so she hovered.
These are going to become a mainstay for silent operations in the field, whether that's message running, search and rescue, or harassment of enemy lines. You're going to have to learn to master them if you're going to be a part of the 1st Vale Rangers.
Not everyone is Helena, the scourge of Alberdand.
The more spiritually wounded Valioff muttered, rubbing at a rather sore butt cheek. Helena had to fight to not blush and instead cleared her throat, coaxing the broom to instead slide forward through the air. She brought it around into a graceful circle, roaming around the nearly 200 or so students.
These brooms, while new, allow us to do things not even trucks or motorcycles can do. We can hide in trees like the harpies, skip along the tops of water like the Yamato, and go over terrain that some of our vehicles may not be able to. We'll be able to take off and arrive to key locations with 0 startup time. As well, their speed is impressive.
Helena continued, turning her broom around on the spot and pointing to a figure quickly approaching.
Alavara, stop!
Mackerat screamed, knuckling down onto her broom with unbridled fear, all while the crimson-haired Valioff laughed gleefully ahead of her. Alavara may have been at ease on these damned brooms, but Mackerat felt as if she was going to fall off if she twitched her butt cheek incorrectly.
We're going too fast. Did you forget you were pregnant or something?
Mackerat wailed as she felt her butt cheek slip off the broom again, and it was only by the grace of the foot stirrups that she didn't leave the broom entirely. While Alavara came to a gleeful halt, kicking out her feet and pulling back on the shaft of the flying broom, Mackerat came to a rolling stop. The brim-touched went cartwheeling across the ground in a flailing hurricane of limbs and a warbling broomstick, while Alavara came to a smooth stop on the ground. Alavara tossed her wind-swept red curls, letting out a contented sigh.
These are way too much fun.
Mackerat moaned from the ground, having kicked herself in the head while making her own stop, and held a hand to her cheek.
I think I prefer being on the ground in a truck, or strapped to the feet of a harpy.
How did it handle?
Helena asked Alavara as she dismounted her broom, then gave her stomach a curious glance. Alavara was openly pregnant now, and there was a growing betting pool on what was going to come out of her. She was still annoyed that someone had put down monster on the betting chart they had hidden within the NCO barracks.
Like a dream.
Alavara giggled out, holding the broom out in front of her while Mackerat got shakily to her feet, partially using the blunt end of the broom to help herself stand up.
You feel as free as a bird on these. I had never done a loop before.
Helena leaned in towards Alavara, speaking quietly.
I thought we agreed on nothing too fancy. Yule has us all walking on eggshells around you due to,
I got a little carried away.
Alavara said with a shrug.
I'll take the blame for it. He can't blame you anyway.
He can sure as hell blame me.
Mackerat called out angrily, her eyes still squinted painfully.
You chewed me out for an hour after dinner last night when I didn't offer to help you get your slippers on.
Alavara rolled her eyes while Helena quietly chuckled to herself.
I don't need help getting my slippers on.
Apparently you do.
Mackerat chided, handing her broom off to the next victim.
Reamed me from end to end, he did. Said I needed to take care of you better while he was gone, and that I needed to do my duties. I don't remember signing up to be an Eldehinda when I signed that bedamned service contract. Why can't that animal woman do it?
Alavara leaned down towards Helena, speaking out the side of her mouth.
She tried. Frankly, I find more comfort in Mackerat than her.
Is it true she sleeps in the same bed as you now?
Helena whispered to Alavara, the question honestly a burning one. Rumors had been flying around for months, and Helena was pretty sure they weren't making the Serbians sleep at the foot of their bed like a dwa. Alavara's eyes took an annoyed edge as she whispered back to Helena, watching Mackerat fish out a healing draught from a nearby medical bag.
We bought her own bed, and she just pushed it next to ours. Yule thinks it's funny, and I've woken up to her cuddling me several times this week.
Keep an eye on that one. She technically has contract power.
Helena mused, watching a new trainee wobble back and forth on a broom as if she were trying to stand up on a flatboat.
But I'm sure she's just doing her best to make you both happy. How did Yule handle the news of you being pregnant anyway? Or is it just some kind of unspoken thing between you two?
Alavara chuckled to herself as Mackerat pulled the cork on her healing draught, sipping it while rubbing at her sore butt cheek.
I wasn't going to be able to hide it forever, and when I started hearing little thoughts from within me, I knew it was time to let him know. He was shocked at first, you know? Just, shocked.
Helena raised an eyebrow as Boone tried his best to stop a green female Oni specialist from tipping off the broom in the near distance.
Boone, her feet aren't on the pegs.
She then turned to Alavara.
Just shocked? When did you tell him?
Do you remember the one time where you guys all got 2 days off?
Alavara asked her, watching along with Helena as another recruit face-planted off their broom and went skidding along the grass. Helena nodded.
Yeah, I remember we all partied the first night and then spent the next day recovering. Boone took me out to a nice little restaurant in New Sanrian. We had something called a burger or whatever. Why?
You had 2 days off because Yule fainted and fell down the stairs.
Alavara said with a sheepish smirk.
I called Yethis over and she came running down the hallway asking me what happened. I said to her that I told Yule I was pregnant, then she fainted and fell down the same stairs, rolled right over Yule and went skidding across the floor. I had to have Nimi go and fetch the medics.
Helena clapped her hands together, her eyes wide with a spark of memory.
Oh, that's why Nemi was full on sprinting down the road the day before. It was quite impressive, actually, that Serbnian had the full wings going.
Helena pantomimed pumping her arms in an exaggerated motion, pulling a snorting laugh from Alavara.
Yes, well, when Gruesome and Solili were able to rouse Yule back to the land of the living, he asked what happened and I told him why he fell down the stairs. He was still a little wobbly in the legs, but Solili was beside herself as apparently she is pregnant as well.
Alavara said, then folded an arm across her chest so she could rest her other arm upon it, setting her cheek in her hand.
Gruesome lost the power in his own knees and fell into Yule as he had a panic attack. And they both went to the ground.
Helena let out a low chuckle, her mouth open in mirth as she imagined the massive human Gruesome pinning Yule to the ground with awestruck eyes.
How are they getting us pregnant so easily? Crossbred children have always been extremely rare, yet humans are just popping them in or out like it was second nature.
May just be a human thing, I suppose.
Alavara mused, then gave a sideways thumbs up to Mackerat, asking if she was okay. Mackerat held up her own thumb as Alavara continued speaking to Helena.
With those two reeling from the news, the base kinda, shut down for a few days until they could get back to grips with each other. So Lily's feet have touched the ground maybe twice, since Gruesome keeps carrying her everywhere. Yule keeps doting on me, which is nice, but the man is a bundle of nerves. He's been trying to learn how to hide his thoughts from me, but he is failing.
What is he thinking then?
Helena asked her, ducking to the right as a riderless broom went sailing a few inches away from her shoulder, the rider sliding along on his back a few feet away.
Has to be nice being able to read his mind after all.
Alavara gave a dark chuckle, then leaned in towards Helena with wide eyes.
Fear.
Fear?
Helena barked out in a laugh.
If Boone ever had fear about me being pregnant, I'd have to beat him with a branch.
It's more the fear of him doing it all wrong again.
Alavara replied, her tone a little more serious.
The man has so much self-doubt about me and the child. I swear his hands shake when he sees my stomach. His long-past wife, the child he left behind. I think he fears messing it up again. It's a silly fear to me anyway, but it haunts him nonetheless.
Helena hummed in her throat as Mackerat approached, popping the cork back on her draught.
We need to flavor these things.
Mackerat muttered, tossing the empty bottle near a sack of other empty bottles.
No one wants to drink something that tastes like the licking a soupy mineral rock. The herbs don't help at all either. Mossy, grassy, herby mineral rock. Why can't they taste like human fruit punch powder?
How'd she take it?
Helena asked, nodding her head sideways towards Mackerat. Alavara grinned.
Like a lime staring down at a bathtub full of water. While Yule puts the fear of gods into her, Nimi keeps loading her up with snacks to give me. She's afraid of my energy levels being too low. Nimi caught her eating one of the snacks once and
she tattled on me!
Mackerat shouted, pulling out of her cargo pockets one of said oat and honey bars that was wrapped in wax paper.
That little beast woman tattled on me to Yule, and he lied into me like I was a naughty child. Then Nimi starts chastising me for eating food designated for pregnant women. As if Alavara's gonna put away 10 oat bars in a single day. It was unfair.
Helena looked to Alavara, and Alavara was giving Mackerat a warm look as she spoke.
I think I'll need to give her a raise, payment for all the hardship and suffering.
Damn right!
Mackerat chuffed out while unwrapping the oat bar, as well as checking over her shoulders to see if Nimi or Yule happened to be nearby.
And no, I see the way you two are looking at me. I am not getting pregnant by some human. I have things to do and food to eat, and none of that has anything to do with plucking a baby out of my front garden.
Alavara leaned her head towards Helena.
Despite her best attempts, she sneaks off sometimes and I always wonder where she goes.
Mackerat gave Alavara a rueful look, as Mackerat was no dummy and had to constantly keep her thoughts on guard around the Valley Elf. Curiosity had taken her one time while she was gambling at the human bar, and despite her best efforts, the elf had found her out somehow.
I prefer bream-touched men, thank you very much.
Mackerat said, crossing her arms.
There's nothing interesting about human men. They've no horns, boring round ears. It's like trying to date a really short Goliath that looks like a dwarf.
Alavara gave a short snicker. Then Mackerat stuck her tongue out at Alavara. It's just a minor thing, and I think you are the best choice for it, Yule said, tapping his papers on his desk as Nimi poured him a fresh cup of tea. Yethis hummed in her throat mutinously, looking down at the paper in front of her.
Teaching the new humans how to work basic healing? What for? The best they can do is make potions and some healing salves.
That'll be enough, and they are all quite keen to learn. Those 5 Finns have been knocking on my damn door every morning wanting to learn, Yule murmured as he took the cup from Nimi with a nod. Even just learning how to work the mundane ways of healing will be a treat. Yethis glared at Nimi. Between Alavara being pregnant and Nimi soaking up all of Yule's attention, she barely got any alone time with him anymore. If she had known that the early days and weeks of them being alone together were so finite, she would have launched her bid then. To hell with the skirmish of romance, she had been a fool to waste time. She had thought she hated Alavara, but she now knew she hated Nimi more than anything else. The stupid Serbian was locked in via contract and could take all the time she needed with Yule. Nimi seemed to see the thought in Yethis' head, and the Serbian smirked prettily, her short tail giving a few smug shakes from the seat of her uniform pants. Yethis hated that, too. Nimi was mixing military uniform and casual civilian wear. The Serbian wore military trousers all the time, along with the newer foot wrappings, but wore feminine, eye-catching blouses, peplums, tunics, and even puffy shirts adorned with a leather bodice. She could only do that because of the fact she was not even properly in the military, as even Alavara wore the proper uniform due to being a lone wanderer. Yethis? Yethis looked up at Yule, having been glaring down at the paper Yule had placed in front of her. She drew in a long breath, but picked up the paper while standing.
I'll get some classes ready. I suppose we could also roll in some of the newer recruits, get them refreshed on some of the first aid methods.
Yethis said, folding the paper up and putting it in her uniform pocket.
I'll put out flyers.
Much appreciated, Yethis. Yule replied, then waved at her as she trudged out the door. Yule stretched, saw that nothing else of real importance was on his desk, and stood up. Well, nothing else really going on today. I'll be betting Alavara is finishing up with the broomsticks here in a little bit.
She should not be of riding brooms,
Nimi said in a chiding voice, pushing her purple and white hair out of her eyes as she put some files in place within a drawer.
What if she is of having an accident? Babies are of great fragility.
You think I would be able to keep her off of those things? Yule muttered, picking up a few folders and putting them on his desk for tomorrow. I couldn't even keep her from smuggling herself out into a convoy. I'm better off saying yes and just taking the brownie points for it. Nimi's ears perked up at the odd word.
Brownie? What is a brownie?
It's a dessert where I'm from, but it's also a kind of point system, like getting credit for doing certain deeds or giving certain people leeway. Yule said with a wave of his hand, picking up his patrol cap. Nimi tapped at her chin a few times with her thick claw, walking slowly after Yule as he turned out a few of the dwarven-made lights.
So, Nimi kind of earning brownie points with of anyone?
I mean, sure, I guess. Yule said with a shrug, opening the door for her. They're only good to one person, though. Nimi made sure to squeeze by Yule in a teasing way, her tail dragging along the fronts of his thighs.
I see.
Yule squinted an eye at her, but shook his head as he closed the door. Did you get groceries?
Servants were getting them done this morning. I was making sure of it.
Nimi said with a slight air of, I get things done, and looked at Yule for approval. Yule started walking down the long hallway, nodding to auxiliaries who waved or nodded at him first. Did you remember to tell them about the clothing we needed?
I did.
And the linens?
Yes.
What about that weird fruit valley elves eat when they're pregnant?
The river berries? I was also telling them to fetch some. I was also telling them to bring home popping wine.
Yule cocked a brow at that, turning to look at Nimi as he opened the next door for her. You found some of that sparkling wine?
I did.
Nimi said with a doting smile as she slid by Yule again due to the narrower door, making sure she was face to, well, chest with Yule this time.
I was of hearing you were of liking it at Queen Madmiren's capital.
Nimi could tell by Yule's pleased smile that she was clearly making a few of these brownie points with Yule. Hopefully a little more than she had hoped, and her tail flicked back and forth as she thought about it. Well, alright then, Yule mused. Should go well with dinner. As the two walked further down the hallway, an Oni and Brim-Tush auxiliary shared a look.
She squeezed against him like that when there was nearly 6 inches between her and the doorframe.
The female Green Oni said, rolling her eyes.
What does she hope to do? Seduce him out from Alavara?
The male brim touch snorted, twiddling his fingers within a folder while trying to find a form.
I doubt it. Everyone knows what's up with the Serbnyan. As soon as she weasels the kid out of him, the Serbnyans will be in for life.
Do you think Yule will go for it, though?
The Oni asked, pursing her lips as she leaned backwards and tried to get another look at Yule and Nimmy, the two walking past the windows.
Who knows?
The brim touch said, pulling out the form.
The humans are extremely weird. There's one in town that has 4 girlfriends and makes them all sleep in the same bed together. One stabbed him in a jealous rage. Only reason why I know about it was seeing him getting stitched up by the medicos.
The Oni blinked, watching Yule and Nimmy walk away.
Huh.
Nimmy's tail was in motion the entire walk home, and Yule even let her rest her arm in the crook of his own. She would have been over the moon if it wasn't for the figure of Mackerat lounging on the stairs, which pulled Yule's attention away from her. Have fun riding the brooms? Yule called out to Mackerat, the brim touch leaning up off the steps while still holding an ice pack to her curved horns, leaving 2 more that were laying on the porch, 1 for each butt cheek.
It was a learning experience.
Mackerat said with a grunt, pulling the ice bag away from her horns.
I learned that sometimes potions can't heal what ice can. I learned that I can kick my shoulder at the back of my heel. And I learned that your elf woman is oddly at ease on the damn things.
Yule bared his teeth in mock pain. Damn. I was hoping she wasn't going to like them. She's going to expect me to buy her a faster one, I bet.
You don't have to buy me one.
Mackerat muttered ruefully, wincing as she made to stand up.
I hate the ruddy things. I would rather ride on a mentally damaged horse than hop on one of those again.
Yule smirked. What? Should I take it off the list of birthday gift ideas?
Hee haw haw.
Mackerat mumbled, turning and gesturing to the front door of Yule's on-base home.
The artist is inside, waiting for Nami. Oh, good.
Nimmy called out, making quick work of the steps with dull, rapid thuds of her wrapped feet.
I was hoping she would be here before dinner.
Yule shoved his hands into his pockets, taking the steps a little slower with Mackerat. Artist?
Nami remembered something Erinda said about Serbnyans looking wrong in books, or whatever the Oni spouted off.
Mackerat hissed out, taking the steps very slowly, and even took the offered arm of Yule when he held out his elbow.
So I sent word off for an artist. He's going to sketch and paint Nami for some book he's making.
Yule hummed in his throat, letting Mackerat lean on him heavily. You wouldn't happen to be talking about a Waddy Moore, would you?
Yep, he's in the house.
Mackerat said, letting out a sigh of relief as they both went over the last stair.
I've met weirder Seder, I guess. The gothic aesthetic, or whatever you humans call it, caught me off guard. He painted his horns white and is wearing black lipstick. I don't know what to make of it.
Yule chuckled. Creative types tend to be a little more out there. Would you or your wounded butt cheeks like some tea?
If there are cookies to go with it, then yes. If not, take your tea leaves and pound them in your ass.
Mackerat growled, glowering as Yule laughed. She didn't let go of his arm, though, holding on to it all the way to the kitchen table. A Waddy Moore, correct to form, was truly out there. The satyr wore custom-tailored clothing cut to resemble human grunge in gothic fashion, all the way down to his black-painted hooves and up to his pierced ears. Yule assumed he must have been the deer type, as he had colored in his dappled markings to further match his goth look. Even as Yule poured Mackerat tea, waiting on Alavara to get home, he observed the satyr as he busily set up his foldable sketching desk. A Waddy had gone as far as to adorn his face in the usual gothic paintings and designs, though his skin was so pale he only had to use the color black. From the black deer coat, the purple colorings on his fur, the all-black clothing, frayed fabrics, and piercings, he could have passed as a cosplayer at a punk renaissance fair.
Nimmy, just get comfortable, okay?
Awadi said, loudly chewing gum he likely bought from the same store as Chicks.
I'm going to do a few sketches.
Nimmy, tail wagging back and forth in short jerks from the attention, smiled brightly as she tilted her chin up.
Like these?
Little lower.
Awadi said, carving a drawing pencil with a short knife. Nimmy tilted her head a little lower, placing her hands in her lap.
This?
Perhaps show a little shoulder.
Awadi murmured, pulling down his own wide-neck shirt to show off his lithe shoulder and collarbones.
Kind of like this.
Yule let out a warning rumble of a hum from the table as he poured milk into Mackerat's tea, who was busily chewing through a jammy dodger. Nimmy smiled again, though it was ringed with unseen blush and a pleased crinkle of the eyes.
I am of thinking not. Yule does not approve.
Square.
Awadi said as he looked over his still bared shoulder and caught half a cookie to his forehead for the trouble.
That was my fucking cookie, Yule!
Mackerat hissed, jam still smeared on her lips from where Yule had grabbed it away from her to use as a projectile. Yule grinned at Nimmy, who blushed unseen again and looked towards her wrapped feet. There's more. Quit your whining. By the time Alavara arrived home, having gone off to inquire about a broom with Chicks, Awadi was 5 drawings in on Nimmy and working on her profile.
What's this all about?
Alavara asked with a polite smile, not sure why there was a moody-looking satyr in her living room. Chicks leaned around her shoulder, blonde hair drifting across her face as she bent at the waist.
Yeah, what's all this about?
Evening, Chicks. Yule called out in English as he poured Mackerat more tea, then switched to Tunka as he turned around and spied an odd package in Chicks' hand. That better not be a broomstick behind your back. Chicks corrected her stance so she was standing straight up, then quickly moved her hands so the broomstick was behind her back.
Broom? Broom? What broom? Alavara, were you holding a broom? I wasn't holding a broom.
Yule rolled his eyes as Alavara quickly trotted up to Yule and wrapped her arms around his neck, kissing him firmly on the lips. Nimmy's eyes drifted towards the two, and her short, bobcat-like tail wagged ever so slightly. The servants of the house, whom Yule had tried to fire multiple times by now, were already starting to finalize their preparations for dinner. The smell must have been quite strong, as Chikily was next to bum rush through the door.
Dinner time!
Chikily shouted, pumping his fist in the air.
Chikily right here on time. The only thing you ever on time for.
Mackerat muttered, drinking her painkiller-laced tea with an angry slurp. Chicks stealthily placed her definitely not a broomstick package in the entryway closet and made quick steps over towards the table, taking a spare chair that was near the window. Chikily came skittering across the floorboards and slammed into his own chair, this one obviously having been repaired multiple times. Dinner will be ready in a moment, Warlord. A male valley elf called out from the kitchen, and Yule rubbed at a temple while pulling out Alavara's chair. Warlord, Warlord, always with the Warlord, Yule grumbled, taking a seat beside Alavara. Can I threaten death over a certain name? I feel inclined to try. Chicks chuckled.
I'm afraid not. They fear Respin and Imra more than they fear you at the current moment. Is Yethis going to be showing up? Yethis is having dinner with Helena and Boone.
Alavara said, though her voice still held a bit of ice when the valley elf was mentioned.
Boone has a friend of his that wanted to meet Yethis, and God's willing they'll hit it off. She's done nothing but glare at me and haunt around the house.
Nimmy, not wanting to be left out, excused herself from Awadi and sat in the chair on the other side of Yule.
She has also been quite mean to me. Yethis is extremely rude in the mornings, is always using of my toilet room, and I was even finding her stealing my clothes.
She stole your clothes? Yule asked, turning to look at Nimmy with some concern. Nimmy shrugged.
She was taking of my new vest.
The one that Yule said looked cute on you, I wonder.
Chicks mused, slowly walking her fingers towards one of Mackarat's jammy dodgers. Mackarat hissed at Chicks' fingers, scooting her cookies away from the human.
Lay off, human. I've had a hell of a day trying to keep up with Wind Rider over there. Winder Rider?
Chikily asked, taking a cup of water offered by one of the servants placing everyone's drinks. Naturally, his had the sleeve around it, allowing harpies to use any cup with their wing claws thanks to the handles.
Alavara can fly? We can all fly, Chickie.
Mackarat said, moving her hand through the air as Chicks continued to walk her fingers up the brim-touched storm.
Quit it, Chicks. Why are you so always like this after you get your hair washed?
Chikily rapidly slapped his wing claws to the table.
Alavara can fly with Chikily tomorrow. Oh, and you can fly with Chikily too. Zoom through air and dance around treetops.
If the brooms can bear my weight, sure. We'll go slowly flying, Chikily, Yule said, placing his hand in Alavara's as Nimmy scooted a little closer to him so their elbows touched. But you know you can't fly too hard or too fast, your injuries. Chikily slumped in his battered chair.
Yes, Chikily no. Chikily not fly too high, too low, too fast, or too fun. Chikily must be safe.
It's for your own good, bud, Yule chided, running his thumb up and down Alavara's fingers. He then felt a slight tug on the waistband of his uniform pants and figured Nimmy had slid her finger into a belt loop again. A quick glance proved him right.
Chikily can always ride on a broom and use his wings.
Mackarat said.
I saw some of the owl harpies doing it. They were sitting on the brooms and using them for propulsion, but used their wings to tilt, turn, and do all the usual harpy stuff. I bet Chikily could figure it out real quick.
Chikily's eyes gleamed with chaotic purpose, and he straightened up in the chair.
What? Chikily can go fast?
He could technically use his wings like a parachute and glide down with the broom if something goes wrong.
Alavara murmured and was quite busy monitoring Nimmy, who now had 2 fingers in Yule's belt loops. She kept trying to get Yule to hold her hand as well, and it was starting to annoy her.
If anything, it means that Chikily could go back to field operations.
Chikily slammed his wing claws onto the table again.
Chikily can go back into the field!
After some time, sure, Yule said, and felt a little uncomfortable as the 2 energies of Alavara and Nimmy swirled around him like the prelude to a tornado. He heard a dull thud and a hiss, and a quick glance told him Alavara had flicked one of Nimmy's knuckles. The servants brought a timely distraction in the form of dinner, and it was another root vegetable and soup night. These were becoming common as the unused stores from the cold months needed to be consumed, and it was a healthy meal for a pregnant valley elf. The wine Nimmy had bought saved Yule's mood, as he was not fond of these soup nights, while Chikily consumed enough bread and butter to feed a small family. Yule poured some wine for Nimmy, who took the glass in both hands and smiled down into it while her tail wagged again. Wag wasn't really the right term as Yule thought about it, pouring his own wine and then a glass of purified mineral water for Alavara. Her little bobcat-like tail was more of a swish or rapid flicks. She had a rather curvy figure, so there wasn't really a lot of room to whack. A deft pinch from Alavara dragged Yule from his thoughts as Nimmy slowly drank from her wine glass, and he cleared his throat, looking over to Chicks. How goes all the steam engine stuff?
It goes.
Chicks murmured, having deleted 2 entire glasses of wine in a champion display of speed drinking.
We expect them to be here within a few days. They've been hauling ass and putting the engines through their paces. The generators have been a real treat too, as nearly every building around here has hot water. There was an old farmhouse a few miles outside New Sanrion they're using for tests.
Yule frowned at Chicks, shaking his head. You guys shouldn't be bothering that old valley elf. Just let him have his garden and raise his chickens.
We're not bothering him.
Chicks retorted, rolling her fork in Yule's direction chidingly.
We're doing wire tests.
Wire tests?
Nimmy asked, moving her knee just enough to touch Yule's.
What is a wire test?
Chicks ran her finger along the top of the tablecloth.
We're testing to see if we can get the wiring designs down to transport electricity long distances. Old Mackey doesn't like the noise of a generator because it upsets his chickens, and he's getting a little too old to spend all the wintry months chopping wood. So we all got together and are using his place to test some stuff. How was the testing gone then? I knew he was out there and sent harpies to check in on him all the time.
Alavara said, drinking her water while quietly wishing it was wine.
He's quite a fickle old fart. Seems to think he's still strong and spry enough to chop down trees and split lumber as if he was 15 seasons old again.
Chicks chuckled.
I'm happy to report he not only has running hot water, but we also fixed him up with one of the new heaters.
You mean the blocks of steel that if you put on the wrong setting, you can fry eggs on them? Yule asked loftily, looking over to Mackerat. Mackerat shrugged.
What? I was hungry.
Chicks snorted.
No, the smaller ones. They're better designed and are put under blankets. He should stay toasty warm without the risk of falling over in the snow and freezing to death.
The small talk continued like this until dinner was over. Chicks had drank way too much wine and ended up happily snoring on the largest of Yule's couches. Mackerat went to her room after showering, and Chikily did as he always did. He fell asleep wherever he pleased, this time choosing the couch since Chicks was there. While the servants washed up below and Nimmy and Alavara went off to bathe, Yule got the beds ready. Yule didn't mind as, while he usually liked bathing with Alavara, he thought the two of them could use the bonding experience. And there was no fucking way he was getting naked around Nimmy. He had just gotten the beds made when he noticed that Nimmy's little bed was wobbling as he threw the fresh comforters on. What the... Yule muttered, then went around to the end of the bed, lifting it. With a creak of wood and a loud clatter, the bed fell to pieces in his hands, almost in a comical way. The joined, nailless pieces of wood all came apart as if they had been unbound by magic. The legs, frame, headboard, and supports thudded to the wooden floorboards in a heap, pressed together by the mattress. What in the goddamn? Yule barked out in English just in time for Alavara and Nimmy to break past the door frame in their robes.
Oh no!
Nimmy cried out, pressing her Serbian-pawed hands to her face to hide her gleeful grin.
What the happened?
Alavara pressed her lips together, then slowly turned her head to stare down at the ears of Nimmy. And that's the end of Chapter 15 of the Veil Rider Book 4. If you enjoy this story and others like them, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel of Garbro's Field Desk. Comment down below. Join us on Discord. There's Twitter, all that fun, goofy shit. And if you really want to help support the channel, there's the coffee and our memberships. Our first shirts give $50 per month. That's the other Killjoy. I think it's Calloused Red. So Calloused Red, Aaron Wilbur, Charles White, Allspark 113, E Machino, Cody Juro, Death Dancer, and Insane Medic. Then there's our E4 Mafia. These guys give $25 per month. That's James Buckner, Sonic Arrow, Splug the Goblin, Darkside, Kiwi Bastard, Lacune 8, Lacune, Josh Beatty, Matty Boy, and Crusader 0625. And then there's our Snuffy Squad. These guys give $5 per month. That's Tab, Alan Solano 9, Split Iris Bear, Micah, Damon Bane, Damon Bain Plays, Scott Anderson, Vertus, Damon McEwen, Super Stink 64, Elderock, Croman, Dalek, Jules, Blonde Lord, Thrace Vega, Devin Sean Holt, Andrew and Gale, Yeti Potato, Skelters, Kite Zero, Shiro, Kiro, Classic Cthulhu, Diesel Dog, Coffee Commander, Anto, Inquisitor Matt, Duncan D, and I'm the Loresmith. And until we see you next time on this side of the veil, that was Vynn. That was Technoward, that was Rue, that was Amanda, that was Hailey, that was Simba, that was Franner, our proofreader, and this is Garbro's Field Desk. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.